Chris Graham joins me this week to discuss trends in homebrewing. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 250. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 250, and it's late January 2022. Chris Graham joins me this week to discuss trends in homebrewing. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Every issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine is packed with articles for homebrewers and beer lovers. They offer access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and the amazing Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com to get your subscription today. And also the Brew Commander, the new brew house controller from Blickman Engineering. It's available in electric, gas, propane models. The patent-pending Brew Commander is a high-quality brew house controller that offers automated step mashing, boil timers, precision temperature control, and advanced settings. Command your brew day with the new Brew Commander. To order yours today, visit blickmanengineering.com. Again, that's blickmanengineering.com. And finally, I'm happy to say the web-based version of BeerSmith is available now at beersmithrecipes.com. BeerSmith for the web lets you edit and brew recipes from any browser, including your desktop, tablet, or mobile device. The new web version gives you access to tens of thousands of recipes, online recipe editing, advanced water tools, and much more. You can try BeerSmith Web for 30 days by setting up an account at beersmithrecipes.com. If you purchase a Gold, Platinum, or Pro license, you get both BeerSmith Web and the desktop version for one low price. Check out beersmithrecipes.com now to give BeerSmith Web a try. And now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, I welcome back Chris Graham. Chris is the president of MoreBeer and has been brewing for over 20 years. Chris has taught at the Seibel Institute and is a former board member at the Brewers Association, Board of Directors, and American Homebrewers Association Governing Council. Chris, it's fantastic to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me again.
It's been a while. It's been about a year since I had you on last, and I just wondered how are things going on at MoreBeer these days?
You know, we're going good. We're I guess getting used to the COVID life in terms of how things are going to run and how things are going to go, and changes at work and changes in consumer behavior. Talk a little about that today.
Well, that's interesting. Have you seen a significant change since the start of COVID? Obviously, I think we saw a little bit of a pickup, right? At the beginning.
Oh, in the beginning, it was like the new hotness, I felt like, and starter kits were flying off the shelf. And, you know, it's funny, is one of the things we look back at in terms of analyzing what's not selling the same. We sold a ton of sanitizer in the beginning in 2020.
Really?
March and April. And I think nobody knew what was good. You know, we were all told to wipe everything down. And, you know, I'd look at like some of these purchases and it'd be a whole case of Star San going to a church or and they place it all online, so you never know who's ordering or whatnot.
That's funny. I never thought about brewing sanitizer being in high demand, but I guess it kind of makes sense, right? There was a shortage there.
I think they couldn't get any sanitizer, so they were just buying things that were listed as a sanitizer.
Yeah.
As to have something as opposed to nothing.
Yeah, and I personally saw a pickup at the beginning of COVID on homebrewing sales, particularly it looked like. I assume you probably sold a lot of small systems at that time, right?
Exactly, and we still homebrewing's still a rock solid hobby. It's not like homebrewing's tanked since COVID, but to be honest, it is down from the peaks of COVID. But those were some pretty high peaks. That first year or so. I think now everyone's in kind of an interesting position of we get to go out. Oh, nope. We no longer get to go out. We're going to go to the bar or to a brewery. Oh, nope. We shouldn't be doing that again. And I don't know how it is there, but here in California, we experience a fair amount of lockdowns. And I feel so bad for all the breweries, especially the very small ones who survive off of that taproom profit. It's got to be so hard because, they're canning and doing anything they can to survive, but you got to know that those margins suck. So I really feel for them. But I think there's still a lot of people like, hey, I'm not going to a bar, so I'll brew myself. But what I think we're also seeing is I'm not going to have all my friends over to drink that beer too. So I've seen a slight shift in people talking more about smaller batches than ever before, and I think that's kind of an interesting thing to watch in the next year or so.
Yeah,
Because they're
it's
really truly brewing for themselves as opposed to brewing for themselves and their friends.
there's no question. I haven't been brewing quite as much just because I've got a 10-gallon system. I can't drink all that beer at once.
Yeah, and we'll talk about these all-in-one systems that are typically 5 gallons, and I think they're doing real well because they're a slightly smaller. Where you're right, 10-gallon was for years the hotness.
Or like I used to do clubs, and now all the club presentations I get asked to do seem to be online. Although recently I finally got asked to do one in person, but almost all of them have been online.
Oh. No, but things here at MoreBeer are going great. We got tons of new products continuing to develop and bring in. If anyone's looking for good deals, we have over 500 items on sale right now, which I saw that number yesterday. I was like, holy cow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then we're selling like over 10,000 items on the website, and it's like, whoa, when did that number get that high? But one of the new things I'm involved with here is a new YouTube show, and it's a weekly YouTube show called Free Beer Fridays that'll be launching February 4th.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. I haven't, it's first I heard of it. We were talking before the show. But yeah. But what are you doing with that show? Like, just real quick, why don't you explain?
Yeah, no, that's the idea of the show is every week the idea of Free Beer Fridays is, I'd love to be like, hey, I'm going to send you beer, but that has all kinds of laws associated with it and problems. So in reality, we're giving away a 5-gallon ingredient kit every week, and that's the base of the show. And in there we can talk about why this kit's awesome, that kind of stuff. I think a lot of us over the years think like, well, I only brew my own recipes, but sometimes these kits are so tried and true. Like the first kit we're going to be doing is Danville Brewing Company's Chuck's Double IPA, which they won a bronze at the GABF their first year entering it. It's an incredible beer for us by a very local brewery, and the guy who brews it is very active in our homebrew club. So it's a very cool story for us. But the idea is we do that, and then every month we give away something bigger that we're introducing. And I won't tell you what the first month is, but it's all free. It's all things that you can sign up. Some of them are as easy as write a comment in the bottom of the YouTube video. Some of them you'll have to email me. Some you'll have to fill out a contest software we use to enter. But free stuff, fun stuff. Hopefully I'm going to be introducing some staff and doing some quick technical tips. And the goal is, I did a lot of that at Siebel, was just very brief, small tips that each one of them makes a big difference in the long run. So that's the idea of the show is under 10 minutes, quick listen. They come out every Friday at noon, Pacific time, 3:00 your time. But they're ones people are going to want to subscribe to, because if they listen first or in the first group, they win things that you can't come back and get later.
Well, that's cool. Well, I look forward to it. But today, Chris, you wanted to talk about some of the trends we're seeing in homebrewing, and that includes both sales and techniques. And just to put it in perspective, I think, a lot of us went through the double-digit growth, right up until, about 2013 or so. And then we did see a slow decline in homebrewing sales, at least across the board. Yep. Of course, things picked up with COVID, and so now we're all kind of interested in seeing where things go next. Yeah,
I think we're seeing a slowdown, but still at a bigger base than before COVID,
right?
If that makes sense. Like, well, we're not seeing, and I use, it's hard to get perfect numbers. The Homebrewers Association does a good job of putting out their surveys to different homebrew shops. I can't wait to see those numbers for next year. But we also talk to a lot of other shops, and we have friendly competition, and and hearing what some of the bigger ones did in the last quarter, it was like, okay, we outpaced them in the quarter. We didn't do as well as we did the year before, but we outpaced what they said they did. And so, it's like one of these ones who's actually telling the truth is always questionable, but
Yeah.
but you get a good sense of it. And I can kind of tell from my wholesale sales, I'm sure you're seeing it, where it's not a growth over last year as much as you would obviously want it to be.
Sure.
But I
So,
think,
so probably not a necessarily new start to the trend of increase in homebrew like we had. I think you told it we had 20% growth for several years in the early
well, and
teens,
remember
I
that
guess.
was right after the '08 crash.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like, well, are we going to go into that? I was, watching the stock market the last few weeks. It's like, oh, and inflation and things like that. Brewing tends to do well. Homebrewing tends to do well when we're in an economic downturn. I'm not rooting for an economic downturn, but
no,
so we'll see what things do going forward. But I think the cool thing is we got a bunch of new people in the hobby.
right.
A lot of people staying at home, working from home, looking for things to do. And I think that's where it really it got more people into the pool, and we're seeing it's a little bit, you come in one way and we kind of have our target customers and what they seem to like, and you kind of start looking at things like, oh, these are very different sales. I mean, the core is still there, but noticing different trends. I'll talk briefly about a product line that was, I don't want to say unintentional, but has really grown, that we just released last November, and there are pop culture kits.
Oh,
And
really?
these are like how to make pickles at home, and how to make kombucha, and how to make kefir, and hot sauce, and anything fermentable, basically cheeses and yogurts and whatnot. But they're a very low cost point. Beautiful packaging, and the instructions are written by this person who also writes children's books,
Hmm.
which sounds kind of funny, but they make instructions so simple. Where we as homebrewers tend to love to get technical and love to go into the details and confuse the hell out of new people.
Yeah, I've dived into that several times in different articles and presentations I've done. That beer brewing is, I think, because of the history, a lot of it developed, a lot of the technology developed in the early '90s, and a lot of that conversation was dominated by scientists and engineers. I think we have a tendency to make things very technical, as opposed to things like mead making or wine making or cider or whatever. Very different.
Well,
So
and it's one of those things, the more you know, the harder it is to give a simple answer.
yeah,
You tend to want to say, like, well, there's more to it, but how do you say that without confusing the people who are just starting? But anyway, we call them our pop culture kits. And
cool.
it's been fun because I think this new set of customers is a little younger than we're used to. And this whole making things at home is pretty popular, and these are at a very small size, 1 gallon type size. And so it's definitely interesting of how quickly they've taken off, and we're already talking about making more kits because people are sending us ideas of things to make.
Now, have you guys?
One person said we need to make a sushi kit, and I'm like, well, isn't that raw fish? Like, well, what are we sending you?
Yeah. Well, related to the COVID thing, have you struggled with supply chain issues? And I think shipping's gone through the roof as well, right?
Yeah, so that's the hardest part is supply chain time of things, how long things are taking, and then we bring things in from overseas. We bring in things from Italy, Germany, China, India, and it used to be, 3,500 for a container load or whatnot, and now you're talking in the 20,000s.
Wow.
And delayed because you got outbid on one or whatnot by months, and so it's just different, and that makes it challenging.
And then, of course, people are a problem. I know I've gone into restaurants and found empty tables because they don't have enough servers, literally, and there's still a wait outside, but they don't have enough servers.
It happens. We've always prided ourselves on having a fairly low turnover. In the last few years, in the base level jobs, we've had our highest turnover we've ever had. And it's definitely interesting in trying to manage, with this latest variant, the amount of outs and
Yeah.
trying to, the emails of there's been an exposure, we're not sure, you're not listed as one of the close ones, but monitor your health, and it's you're trying to follow all the proper protocols, but yet you're also trying to get orders out the door, and so it's been a challenge. It was great. I had a conversation with a couple of the new guys outside yesterday who have had like 20 different jobs during COVID,
Wow.
and they're either blowing smoke in my, or they're like, hey, this feels like the most family orientated place we've been to, and we really like it here. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Let's hopefully keep a group who likes that environment, and who wants to be part of something as opposed to just have a job for the day and go home.
Yeah. Well, dropping the COVID changes for now, one of the biggest changes we've seen in the last few years has been a move from extract brewing to all grain brewing. And that's pretty fantastic, really, that that it's happened. But a pretty huge change. I mean, literally, I think when I started, it was 2/3 or probably even more of that extract brew.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things I'm proud of what MoreBeer's done over the last 25 years, and this is kudos to Olin. When I first met him, he was, a year or so into the business, and I'm like, where are your cans of malt extract? He's like, I don't sell cans of malt extract. I sell malt extract, but I buy it in the drum. I pour it fresh. I get it to customers fresh. They add their own grains for color, blah, blah, blah. And, when you and I probably started homebrewing, most recipe kits were like, oh, you're going to get a blank pale ale kit or stout kit, and you're going to add this to it, or use 2 kits to make 5 gallons or whatnot, where you didn't really have a whole lot of control.
No.
And then extract really became something, and John Palmer really got this popularized, which I love, which is, how to properly steep your grains and how to, get that extra level of control in it. And extract's done quite well for the last 15 years. And there's still a good amount of people still brewing extract out there, but all grain has really, that was, you'll see the words even of how we still sell all grain kits. We have the word advanced in there, which implies, advanced knowledge, advanced tools, advanced equipment, blah, blah, blah. But the reality of it is most of it has to just do with the knowledge. And you know that as well as anyone else, but you need a little bit more equipment. And it used to be a game of, where are you in your hobby? How much have you invested? How many of these things do you have that are necessary to do it? And now we sell a starter kit. A homebrew starter kit that you are doing all grain, your first batches, and people are having great success. So it's amazing. And I think a little bit of the technology has made it easier, because they offer, an easier way of doing it. And let's face it, we've turned into the YouTube nation, where we learn a lot of our stuff on YouTube, and maybe the idea of what is a mash tun isn't as scary now as it was in 1985, when you're trying to read it in a magazine, go to a local brew house, to try to figure out, like, what am I trying to do here? Now you can see 28 videos that are 5 minutes long or longer on it.
Yeah, thank goodness technology's changed now too, so we can, you can predict your mash temperature. You can predict, know ahead of time what's going to happen.
I only wish there was software that would help with that.
Yeah, that would be nice. But anyways, another trend you mentioned was moving to dry yeast over liquid yeast. And this one surprised me a bit because, I still primarily use liquid yeast, although occasionally I'll use dry yeast if I just don't have time to run to the store. But
I don't think dry yeast has surpassed liquid yeast. I don't want to say that, but its use rate has been going up quite a bit. Liquid yeast will always have more varieties because certain yeasts you just can't dry out, but the amount of varieties now you can get dried is tremendous. And typically your cost for dried is a percentage less.
It is.
Quite a bit less. I'm going to be honest, I've started to use it more. And one of the main reasons is I don't oxygenate anymore. I don't even hydrate or oxygenate. I'm using most of the time Cellar Science Cali yeast and having awesome success with it. And, working with the people behind making it, they're like, yeah, on your first pitch, it's got all the oxygen it needs and all the sterols and all the nutrients it already needs. And, we were trying to write instructions on hydrating it, and they're like, we don't even recommend that. Just go right on to your wort. And to be honest, I can almost guarantee, new brewers now that you're going to make great beer using dry yeast. I have a harder time sometimes with a brand new brewer saying you're going to guaranteed make great beer with liquid yeast. Now, if you know what you're doing with liquid yeast and you're paying attention to when that yeast was made and how it was handled and all the way through and making a starter and all that stuff, yeah, liquid yeast is awesome because you're really controlling those variables. But if you're just getting going, that's a lot of new variables that you're not used to. And I find a lot of people probably ruin their batch before they even make their batch, meaning I've seen some people making starters and the way they're handling their environment is so scary that I'm shocked that they can make beer out of it.
Yeah, I mean, and dry yeast has a significant advantage in storage time. I mean, you can keep it in the fridge if you store it properly, potentially for years.
I mean, and I've always been a proponent of, no matter what, have a pack of dry yeast in your fridge. I keep it in the butter drawer, which my wife always laughs at me. There's always a couple dry yeast of baking or baking yeast, because my kids and I like to bake periodically, and a beer yeast, because in case a liquid yeast didn't take off or whatnot, I'd have one there just to use at moment's notice.
And of course, the Kveik yeast has been a huge seller too, right?
Holy crap! That felt like it came out of nowhere. And I mean, I realize this is years, not just like the last year, but I consider it a pretty big game changer for a lot of homebrewers. We're here in California, and especially our summers get out of control. And as we all know, one of the biggest things you can do to make great beer is to have great temp control of fermentation. And that's a pretty big ask for new brewers, or for a lot of brewers. You live in an apartment. Why don't you have an extra refrigerator around, or a glycol system? Or, these are pretty big asks sometimes. Yeah. Where people are like, I just want to make good beer in the summertime. And I know a lot of people who don't brew in the summer. They're just like, I just don't brew in the summer. And it's like, well, that sucks.
I mean, I've definitely noticed that sales are lower in the summer. I think people are just doing other things,
I was going to say the kids are out of school. They're hopefully traveling and being out at the outside somewhere doing things. But I also think it's one of those things where it's like, it's 104 degrees, blah, blah, blah. Well, some of these people are like, I can't wait for it to get to 104 degrees because I'm going to use this Lutron strain or Lutra strain or whatnot. And it's like, whoa. So one of the most interesting things is, did you happen to watch my video on brewing on Mount Whitney?
I have not seen it, but I saw your post from Mount Whitney, and I think I may have even commented on it. The picture of you and Olin up there, that was cool.
I think you did, and thank you. But if you ever get 15 minutes, it's a fun little video. Joe did an awesome job editing 100 hours down into 15 minutes. And we're typically about get to the point. Don't make us watch something super long that's not interesting. But one of the things that came out of that, we got a lot of people who loved it, and they're like, "Well, what are you doing next?" Yeah. And we're like, "Oh, that was it." So now
you got to find another mountain to climb.
Well, you can't always be mountains. There's other adventures. So we're planning our next adventure. I'm not going to say what it is, but one of the goals is to have a quick turn beer. And so I started brewing test batches with these Kveik strains because I know I can do it hot, and I know they're known for quick turn. In fact, one of the first stories I read about that yeast was some of these traditional Norwegian breweries that were literally brewing on Wednesday and having people to the brewery on Friday night to drink it. Not to drink it all, but they actually, as a fascinating aside, it sounds like, if I understood the story right, because it was translated, they brew on Wednesday,
Mm-hmm.
have everyone come to the brewery in town. Now, granted, these are small towns, and they all got to have their input to the beer before they put it into the barrels.
Interesting. And
You know,
what would the input consist of? I
too
guess.
sweet, too malty, or
Oh,
too
okay.
sweet, too hoppy, too, trying to get the flavors they want.
Hmm.
And I guess sometimes to throw it away, like that failed. In fact, as breweries, they dried the yeast out
Right.
and reused it again. And I have a feeling sometimes that doesn't go well.
Yeah.
So there could have been times where they're like, throw this away, start over. We'll get it right the next time. But anyway, doing this adventure brew where we want to turn it in a week. That's the goal. Like drinking it the next week is still part of the adventure.
Right.
So I started researching the different yeast strains, and then I'm like, well, I just want to see what my customers think. So I go on MoreBeer, go to the yeast, go to the Kveik yeast strains, and I start reading all the customer comments and reviews. And it's like this one strain, the Lutra strain, it's almost every other yeast it's my new White Labs California. It's my new USO5. It's my new 1056. All the traditional California strains. I'm like, that can't be right. That can't be true. And other people are brewing lagers with it. It's like, well, what the? So I tried it in this last batch, and I gave it out to a bunch of people for Christmas. Just didn't tell them how I brewed it. And they're like, oh my God, that was awesome, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, geez. I mean, I fermented it in the 90s. It fermented in like 3 days. So I don't know. It's pretty fun to play with. I don't think it'd be my all the time yeast strain, but fun to try out once in a while.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've had good luck with the yeast as well. It seems to work in almost any conditions. I mean, it's really forgiving, which is great, especially if you're new to brewing. So,
well, and then the article the few articles I've read out of Norway, one of the things they like to do is actually ferment it cooler and stress the hell out of the yeast. Sorry for swearing. Stress the heck out of the yeast because it makes unique flavors that way. At 95 to 100, it's not stressed, it's happy. But at 70 degrees, apparently it's pretty stressed and creates its own set of flavors.
Yeah. Well, you joined me for an episode on small all-in-one brewing systems. It was back episode number 224 about a year ago. Have you still seen the all-in-one system selling really well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a feeling.
That's the short, easy answer. And like I mentioned earlier, it's like it's new people are starting with it. Not always starting brewing with it, but they'll get into brewing and then they want to go all grain, and that's like the easy, cheap, quick way to do it. And what I'm finding in talking to people, because it's become my go-to as well, and what I'm finding with people I'm talking to about it who've been brewing for years, it's kind of becoming theirs too. So it's a lot of times a second system. Like they have, I have my system, but I use this all the time. And it might be because of the length of the brew day, because of setup and cleanup and blah, 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 or the space that it takes for storage, or laziness because it runs off electricity. And that's always there, where sometimes, use your gas heater outside and all of a sudden you're out of propane. And
Yep.
So just been interesting that way. But yes, they continue to be a great seller.
Yeah, I had a feeling. I understand you did quite a bit of work with the Brewzilla yourself. What was your experience working with that particular system?
I'm still using it today, and I love it. I did a whole page on it, just from me in my articles section on how I'm using it and what I'm finding. It's not perfect. Mm-hmm. No system is in my mind, but for its price and for its functions, it's amazing. I love.
Remind me what features that one has, the Brewzilla versus some of the other ones.
And they're all evolving. That's the hard part. But I love it's under $400. I'll just say that first. And most of them are above that. So that's going to be hard to beat. It's got a control panel that you can do. I forget how many. It's more than you need step mashes where it'll handle the temp and time hold between rests. But what I really use it more than anything is the delayed start, so that I can come out to hot water ready to brew. And it just, because I set it up the night before, treat my water, and set the temp up, and it cuts down on my brew day tremendously. I can brew now and do my kids' sports on a Saturday, and it's amazing.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So that's one feature. It has a built-in pump. Many of them do. Many of the low end don't. You kind of buy and add one. Most of the higher end ones, most of these all-in-ones now have like multiple levels of them.
Mm-hmm. Is that your favorite system? I know you've probably used most of the all-in-one systems, and a lot of us haven't had a chance to try them all.
I have two that are my personal favorites, and I'll be honest, the Braumeister is my number one. That's the original in my mind. That's the German-made one.
They're really nice, but they're not cheap, right?
Oh, these are the Ferrari of all-in-one systems, if you can have that. Yeah. For me, what it really comes down to is those at the size I want to brew, you need 220 where you're going to brew, and I don't have that.
Right.
I could probably have an electrician come out and run it there, and then I'll probably I'll have to go through, an electrical upgrade to get today's codes, and it's just the cost in my brain just keeps adding up. So I like the 110. So within that, the Brewzilla wins then, because I can buy 5 of the Brewzillas for one of the Braumeisters.
Right.
But the fit and finish and the quality and everything on the Braumeister is absolutely amazing. And everyone who has a Braumeister raves about them. But I brewed on the Grainfather. I brewed on the Mash and Boils. I brewed on a bunch of them. I haven't yet used the Foundry. Hint, John, if you want to send me one, I'll be happy to try it out and report back. But we drop ship those, so we've never had one here to actually use. He's got lots of great functions and stuff in there.
Yeah, I've seen his systems. I haven't actually had a chance to brew on that particular one, but seems like a really nice system.
Well, he thinks to think out things really well, and use the Grainfather, but I haven't used the latest edition ones, and so it's like I can't comment on those. They look pretty. They all look pretty, and I don't think you're going to go wrong with any of them.
And what are some of the key features you might look at if you're trying to pick out an all-in-one system?
For me, having the ability to do the remote start. And I say remote, it's not like I'm sitting there on an app on my phone starting it. It's not that. It's I'm dialing it in, and it's just sitting idle until whatever I've set, an hour before I think I'm going to brew or whatnot, and it'll start heating my water. So by the time I get out there, it's all ready to go. So having some sort of delayed start would probably be a better word for it.
Yeah.
I like the ability to do step mashing. I don't do a ton of it. I do more, if anything, a single infusion with a mash out, but I like to just dial that in so I can be working on sanitizing and everything else, that I don't have to sit there be watching that.
And the pump's nice too, because it recirculates.
I was just about to say, a built-in pump for me is a must. Mm-hmm. Having a separated one with hose clamps and all this, I don't know. This is not a key feature because so far they all run off electricity, but they're just so quiet. It's a delight to brew.
Yeah.
You can hear yourself think. Make sure whatever one you're looking at, that I am a big proponent. Make sure you can handle your entire brew day on your own. Like some people are always about, if I can make more, the better. But when you think about lifting out that mash basket, and you're talking a 10-gallon batch, that thing's going to be heavy. And now most of the manufacturers actually make a block and tackle system, but you still got to. I brew out in my back patio. There's nothing to attach that up above.
Yeah, I have a Brew Easy, and it's really nice because it's a 2-vessel system, and it just gravity feeds into the boiler. So that is actually very convenient. But
Absolutely. And that kind of goes in the next thing is like any of them, make sure they store nicely. And that's breweries are awesome, but you get a little bit more storage than these singles, which they all, they all German doll into one little thing. Or not, Russian doll. That's what I was thinking. So, the biggest things are I would say you want to make sure you look at the reviews. Make sure, talk to other people who've used them. I don't think you're going to go wrong with any of them. I wouldn't buy some of these. I've seen some out of Alibaba that I would be pretty suspect about, especially since you are plugging into electricity in your house.
Yeah.
But buy from someone who stands behind it, and I think you'll be just fine.
Well, another trend has been towards stainless steel everything, which is, almost unthinkable when I started brewing. But, the idea that the whole brewing system, the fermenter, the accessories really are all stainless now.
It's funny. I think back to the late 90s, early 2000s. And have you ever met Colin, who works for me?
Yeah, I think I have.
Super nice guy. Not insulting you, Colin. I think nerd's a good word, but he's like the king of the nerds when it comes to brewing, and he's brewed professionally at Downtown Joe for years, and gives talks at the Master Brewers Association, and we would always talk about like, okay, let's redesign our mash tuns. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we could build it out of stainless? Wouldn't it be great if we did this? Wouldn't it be great if we did that? And it's like, I think this is a case of we always wanted stainless, but the price was just way too much. And the amount of units we did was way too low. And I think things kind of finally caught up. And I looked back, thinking about this the last few days, and I don't know if you know Dan Listerman, but he was king of figuring out, how do I take this complicated, and he had a brewery too. How do I take this complicated thing that we do in a brew house, but make it for home brewers?
And he sold all kinds of accessories too, if I remember right.
Absolutely. But they were almost always made out of plastic and copper and affordable things that he could make locally. I think those first original false bottoms, if I'm not wrong, I think they were hand drilled, all of them.
Wow.
Those plastic ones, because those holes were not exactly even. And then I remember when he would get backed up and then send us a whole bunch, and you kind of feel like, oh, someone must have drank like 4 or 5 beers before they did this one, because they missed a whole bunch.
Well, I mean, a big part of the hobby when I started, and I think probably when you started as well, was actually making the equipment. I mean, you would buy in, like an igloo cooler and, fashion some kind of false bottom and run tubing around everywhere. And, that was part of the hobby.
I'm a gearhead, and I fully agree with you. It was really part of the journey of homebrewing for me. Is I have zero background in anything. And the first time I'd ever really thought about a ball valve or anything was in regard to a ball valve for brewing, not like, oh, the water supply in my house or anything like that. I was 18, so what did I care about that? But it's just funny, metallurgy, welding, biology, all of that kind of stuff I learned because of the love of this hobby.
Right.
Not going through school or whatever. Building wort chillers, wrapping around a corny keg, and praying you didn't kink that copper and blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that, mentioning about stainless steel, everything is stainless steel now. And sometimes I think we do things out of stainless steel because we can.
Yeah.
And it's like, I miss copper chillers. Like, they're still there, but they're actually more expensive. I think they're more aesthetically pleasing. I think there's a little bit of copper pickup, which isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as you're cleaning it right and, blah, blah, blah. But bulletproof, stainless is just bulletproof and nowadays less expensive often.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just interesting how much it has changed. One final topic you mentioned was simplified draft systems. And what do you mean by a simplified draft system?
In my mind, it starts with one thing that, at least for me, I've watched commercial draft for years. They use push fittings instead of, most of us all use flexible tubing and hose clamps to clamp it all down with.
Right.
And anyone I've ever met in homebrewing has had a gas leak at some point in their life, if not many of them. And then you go to a brewery, and I helped install a few towers. I'm like, wait, you just slid that into a little fitting and it didn't leak, and it won't leak for years. And they're like, oh yeah, no, this is the standard. So for me, the Duotite, which John Guest is in my mind the OG of this, but Duotite is a great price point. And like the semi-rigid line, Eva Barrier is the one we sell. They're so easy to install, so many less gas leaks. And then the coolest thing of all is, I want to switch this from a ball lock to a Sankey. I can actually just take the line off of the fittings instead of like buying a ton of adapters to move it around.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like,
I like that. I probably need to look into that, because I've had gas leaks forever over the years, it seems like, and you can never get them all out.
I just switched out my kegerator to it, and my kegerator's from 1998, I think. It's a true brand one, and it's, that was one of the other things I'll talk about with draft being so much easier is, I bought like a commercial kegerator.
Right.
And nowadays I sell kegerators that are like purpose built for homebrewers. Like, saying that out loud is funny.
Absolutely.
And these things are gorgeous at like insane prices, and like the latest ones we sell hold 8 corny kegs.
Wow.
And then, I mean, those are huge. Those are the double wides. But then we have the 4 ones that hold 4 corny kegs, and that was almost unheard of. Yuzu's 3, depending on how you juxtapose them around and whatnot. And so anyway, these are gorgeous. The Komos brand one is stellar. And when we started selling those, they all come with these Duotite fittings, and I'm like, helping customers assemble. I'm like, God, you got it easy. You're not trying to like do a hose clamp inside of a tower anymore. Like, how many of us have like cut up our cuticles 1,000 times by having a screwdriver slip because we're too dumb to buy the kind that were the female for the for the fitting.
Interesting.
And the other thing is, with serving and such, like forward sealing faucets, relatively new to homebrewing, 8 to 10 years, right?
Yeah, when I finally bought a kegerator, I ended up getting the top of the line Perlix because they're just awesome,
Yeah, those forward sealing faucets are just insane. And you think about what we used to do with our beer is barbaric. We would let air just sit in that pocket and bugs live in there and everything like that, and then pour the next beer. And let's face it, most of us homebrewers are not, drinking all day long, hopefully, or even every day. Sometimes I'll go a week between serving, and it used to be like I would feel like I'd break that faucet handle trying to pull that start. And now with the forward sealing ones, it's boom, nice and easy, and works every time. And then I really feel like I only have to sanitize, just that last little bit that the beer travels through going into the glass.
Yeah, it drives me crazy when I get, I go to a lot of, I go to breweries, and I occasionally get like a whole pint full of DMS, and it's, or I'm sorry, diacetyl, and the diacetyl is almost always from the keg lines. It's because they haven't cleaned them, or the taps are dirty, or the taps are a mess, and it's frustrating.
My first year teaching with Siebel, we were in Durango, and for me, this was like I was starstruck. It's Lynn Kruger, Keith Lemke, Ray Daniels, Chris White, and Randy Mosier all walk into a bar, which sounds like it should be the start of a joke, but we all order the same beer, and you could literally tell. And it was in the middle of the day. And I think this was kind of a college-y bar, but it was a Belgian beer. I forget which one. And this was like 12 years ago. The first beer was hazy. The second beer was a little clearer. By the fifth beer, it was, perfectly clear, which this beer should have been. And the few after that were, and we started talking about them, and you're exactly right. I mean, it was just like the first one was a nightmare. The second one was pretty bad. The third one had taint, like a little bit of taint left. And it was from the line. It was from the faucet. It was just a hot mess, but just amazing how that can affect the whole thing.
Yeah, I didn't mean DMS. I meant diacetyl, but I had one about a month ago, and it was like a cup of diacetyl. It was just
Yeah.
unbelievably bad, and it was a nice commercial beer, So I knew the beer itself wasn't bad,
And the last thing I'll talk about simplification or availability more than anything in draft. 10 years ago, we would have never even used the word can when it comes to homebrew.
Right.
That just wouldn't be a thing. I sell a ton of cannulars, which is a can seaming device. And we're starting to sell can filling stuff for homebrewers.
Wow.
And now some of this is going to, small craft beer, but a lot of it is homebrewers. I was talking to someone running a homebrewing competition, and they said last year they had a small place, 25 entries, 3 of which were canned by 3 different homebrewers.
Wow. Yeah, that's I hadn't. I mean, I know it's very popular at the well, especially the pandemic at the commercial level, but I didn't know that many homebrewers were starting to do it.
Yeah, it's truly amazing, and
you guys get into I think there's this thing called crawlers as well, right? Which is like a can, kind of a quick seal can they can pour right off the tap.
You still need a seamer for that, but they're the 32 ounces. So instead of taking a glass jug home, you're taking a big can home. And that has its benefits for sure. And we do sell, one of our cannulars can do crowlers, but they're not as popular as your traditional, 16-ounce one.
Right. Well, Chris, we're coming near the end of our time, but I want to get your closing thoughts on some of the trends in homebrewing, some of the things that are really selling well for you.
Well, we almost talked about, I have 2 things to go over for the closing thoughts.
Sure.
One of which, we talked about supply chain being hard because of COVID, but in general, for the last 8 to 10 years, supply chain in general has gotten so good. Mm-hmm. The ability to do quality manufacturing at lower
startup
run
costs.
sizes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it serves our niche industry better. We're not getting them into Home Depots. We're not getting them into Costco. This isn't that size run. We're doing smaller runs, but now it's a thing of everyone putting out products. It's quality or die. You don't see really crappy products hitting our industry anymore, which is pretty awesome. The other thing I find interesting. I'm kind of a tech nerd, and everyone talks about the Internet of Things, and I find it kind of funny because I think there's a good blend of all of it. And at first, I was the type who I wanted everything to have an app on my phone, and it's like you kind of think about it after a while. It's like I have one of these electronic things I put in my pool, and I can now do it on my phone, and I did that like twice, and I'm like, who cares? I just, give me a button to press so I can walk away. So it's funny, but a lot of like the devices that came out were the Internet of Things, kind of, none of them really succeeded that well when they were truly the Internet of Things. Now, the ones that have done well are the ones that have localized. So it can be gotten to from the internet, but it really can be handled locally if you want to, the tilts and the I can't, I'm drawing blanks on things, but I think
I had to go to a web-based version last year because people just want to be able to access, they opt from anywhere, right? Does that make sense?
It does, and with what you do, that makes perfect sense because it's like, I want to get it from my phone, I want to get it from the from a website. None of us want. Like, it's funny how little software I put on my computer anymore, and I can, run it off a Chromebook. I can run it off of, a tablet or whatnot, which makes going into the brewery or my brew house a little more friendly than my full laptop. But it's just funny how the equipment that came out for it, and a couple of them, when they died as a company, their products died. Yeah. And now homebrewers, being awesome, smart people, are making their own ways to get around it. The Pico, the brewery, people are finding ways. There are forums on Reddit and on Facebook that they're writing their own software so that these products can work again, which is really cool to see.
That is cool. Yeah, that is cool. Well, Chris, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be with us.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. This is fun.
And today my guest was Chris Graham. He's president of MoreBeer, certainly one of the largest homebrew supply companies in the U.S. Chris, thanks again.
Appreciate it.
A big thank you to Chris Graham for joining me this week. Thanks also to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They offer access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and the amazing Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com to get your subscription today. And also the Brew Commander, the brewhouse controller from Blickman Engineering. It's available in electric and gas propane models. The patent-pending Brew Commander is a high-quality brewhouse controller that offers automated step mashing, boil timers, precision temperature control, and advanced settings. Command your brew day with the new Brew Commander. To order yours today, visit blickmanengineering.com. Again, that's blickmanengineering.com. And finally, the web-based version of BeerSmith is available now at beersmithrecipes.com. BeerSmith for the web lets you build, edit, and brew recipes from any browser, including your desktop, tablet, or mobile device. You can try BeerSmith Web for 30 days by setting up an account at beersmithrecipes.com. If you purchase a Gold, Platinum, or Pro license, you get both BeerSmith Web and the desktop version for one low price. Go to beersmithrecipes.com to give it a try today. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great brewing week.